This is Lieutenant Heverly. Can I help you?
Hi, my name is Karrie. My friends called me earlier today and told me about my mom. And that she, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
He called and told me that my mom hung herself.
Yeah, we are looking into it. And still with you now?
Yeah, she's in my apartment.
Why are you here? What are you doing? Why? Why? These were the last desperate words Michele Neurauter screamed before her own daughter stood guard downstairs while her father strangled the life out of her. This isn't fiction. This isn't a horror movie. This is the disturbing true story of a mother who knew she was in danger, who begged her friends to protect her children if anything happened to her, and whose worst nightmare came true in the most unimaginable way possible. Before we dive into this chilling case, I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to Cold Crime Cases, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Are you listening from New York, California, maybe somewhere across the ocean? Let us know because this community is growing and we want to know where our true crime family is tuning in from. And speaking of staying safe, I've written a book specifically for women called True Crime Survival Guide: How to Stay Safe in a Dangerous World. You'll find the link in the description and pinned comment below. In a world where danger can come from the most unexpected places, even your own family, this guide could save your life. Now, let me ask you something that's going to haunt you throughout this entire story. What would you do if the person you trusted most, the person who was supposed to protect you, became your greatest threat? Keep that question in mind as we unravel this nightmare. It was just after 3 in the afternoon on August 28, 2017, when a car pulled into the driveway of a quiet home on Dwight Avenue in Corning, New York. Corning is a peaceful, historic town about 250 miles north of New York City. The kind of place where neighbors know each other, where doors are sometimes left unlocked, where nobody expects true evil to take root. The house belonged to 46-year-old Michele Neurauter, an English professor, and her 14-year-old daughter. Michele had arranged for a local friend to pick up her teenage daughter for swim practice that afternoon. Standard routine, normal day, or so it should have been. When the friend arrived, something felt wrong immediately. Nobody answered the door. The house sat dark and unnaturally quiet. He knocked again, louder this time, calling out their names. Nothing. Peering through the glass panel on the door, he tried to make sense of what he was seeing in the dim hallway. There, in the shadows near the stairs, was the silhouette of a woman. She appeared to be standing motionless on the staircase, just a short distance from the door. He called out again, pressing his face closer to the glass, trying to get a better look. That's when the horrifying truth crashed over him like ice water. The woman wasn't standing at all. She was hanging. Suspended from the banister by a rope around her neck, Michele Neurauter's lifeless body swayed slightly in the stillness of her own home. Corning police responded within minutes to discover a scene that would launch one of the most complex and disturbing investigations in the town's history. Michele's body hung from the second-floor banister, a rope cinched tight around her neck. The house was empty, dark, silent as a tomb. No suicide note was found anywhere. At first glance, it appeared to be a tragic suicide. A mother of 3 who had finally succumbed to whatever demons had been tormenting her. But in true crime, things are rarely as simple as they first appear. Within the hour, Michele's ex-husband, 47-year-old Lloyd Neurauter, was on the phone with police. He'd been away in California for a job interview, he explained, and was just now hearing the news. His response? He wasn't surprised at all.
I know of that from past behaviors, that there was an occasion where Michele was having a tantrum, that she would open the door and scream things down the stairs and then slam her bedroom door, and did that so many times. She actually broke the door frame from doing that she was just completely out of control. Michele was screaming and furious. She really pushed me out of her life.
I know from past behaviors that Michele would have tantrums, Lloyd told the dispatcher, his voice eerily calm for a man whose ex-wife had just died. According to Lloyd, Michele had talked about suicide constantly. She'd even made suicide pacts with friends, he claimed. She suffered from severe emotional problems. Once, in a fit of rage, she tried to run over their daughter Karrie as she backed out of the driveway. The woman was unstable, dangerous even. Her death was inevitable. Police knew that domestic disturbances at the Neurauter residence weren't uncommon. Over a dozen 911 calls had been made from that address in just the past 2 years. Screaming arguments, conflict, chaos. It seemed that the toxic environment had finally pushed Michele over the edge. Case closed, right? A troubled woman takes her own life after years of turmoil. But Chief Jeff Spalding wasn't convinced. Something about the scene gnawed at him from the moment he stepped into that house. Every time someone scrolls past, another woman's suffering fades into silence. Don't let that happen. Subscribe and make her story matter. Chief Spalding was one of the first officers to arrive at the Dwight Avenue home. As he examined the scene, several details jumped out at him, each one more disturbing than the last. First, Michele was a devoted mother. Everyone who knew her said so. Despite all the family conflict, despite the bitter divorce, despite everything, her children were her world. Would a woman like that really choose to end her life in a way that would traumatize her daughters forever? Would she risk her 14-year-old finding her hanging in their home? Second, hanging is statistically an unusual method for women. Women who take their own lives typically choose less violent methods. This felt wrong. Then there were the physical inconsistencies at the scene. In Michele's bedroom, the mattress had been shoved away from the bed frame. Smudges of blood marked the wall. These weren't the signs of a peaceful decision to end one's life. This was evidence of a struggle. But the most chilling details were on Michele's body itself. She had ligature marks around her lower lip, as if someone had been pulling the rope from behind and it had caught on her chin. Around her neck were deep scratches, the kind a person makes when they're clawing desperately at a noose, fighting for air, fighting to live. Michele Neurauter hadn't wanted to die. Someone had killed her and staged it to look like suicide. Chief Spalding immediately requested assistance from the state police. What had started as a suspected suicide was now a homicide investigation, and the clock was ticking. While police were still processing the crime scene, the station received a phone call that would change everything. On the other end of the line was Michele's daughter, 19-year-old Karrie Neurauter, sobbing so hard she could barely speak.
This is Lieutenant Heberly. Can I help you?
Hi, my name is Karrie. My friends called me earlier today and told me about my mom. And that she, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
He called and told me that my mom hurt herself.
Yeah, we are looking into it. And still with you now?
Yeah, she's in my apartment.
Karrie was Michele's middle child. She just started her freshman year at the Rochester Institute of Technology, barely moved into her new dorm, when she received the devastating call from a family friend. Her mother was dead. But here's where things got strange. As the call continued and Karrie answered questions about her sister's whereabouts, something remarkable happened. The sobbing stopped. The voice that had been choking on tears just moments ago became completely calm, matter-of-fact, almost businesslike.
He called and told me that my mom hurt herself.
Yeah, we are looking into it. And still with you now?
Yeah, she's in my apartment.
The shift was so dramatic, so sudden, that the officers listening couldn't help but notice. It wasn't natural. People don't go from hysterical grief to complete composure in a nanosecond, not unless they're performing. Karrie then revealed something crucial. She'd been at her mother's house the night before, the very night Michele died. She and her mother had gotten into an argument. Karrie had stormed out of the house and taken her 14-year-old sister with her, driving her back to Rochester. Police immediately spoke with Karrie's younger sister to corroborate the story. What the 14-year-old told them sent chills down their spines. Yes, Karrie had rushed in and dragged her out of the house late that night. But before they left, before Karrie hurried her out the door, she'd heard something. Screams. Her mother's voice crying out from upstairs. It sounded like someone was attacking her. Think about that for a moment. A 14-year-old girl heard her mother being attacked, and her older sister rushed her out of the house. Why would Karrie do that unless she knew exactly what was happening upstairs? Unless she was part of it? Police now had a new theory. Perhaps the argument between Karrie and Michele had escalated into violence. Perhaps Karrie had strangled her own mother in a rage, then staged the scene to make it look like suicide. But what daughter would strangle her own mother? What kind of person could do something so unthinkable? The answer to that question would prove to be even more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. If stories like this make you want to protect the innocent and expose the truth, then don't just watch. Subscribe. That single click could be the reason another story finally gets heard. To understand how a daughter could become complicit in her own mother's murder, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to understand the toxic environment that shaped Karrie Neurauter from childhood. Michele and Lloyd met in 1989 while they were still in high school. They were young, in love, and convinced they'd found their soulmates. They married just months after graduation, barely adults themselves, and headed off to college together. Michele earned a master's degree in literature. Lloyd studied electrical and computer engineering. The young couple settled into a small farmhouse in Corning, where they had 3 daughters. Lloyd found work as a design engineer at Corning Glass. Michele put her career on hold to homeschool their children and volunteer in the community. From the outside, they looked like the perfect American family. 3 beautiful daughters, a mother devoted to raising them, a father with a stable career. But behind closed doors, behind the facade of normalcy, something dark was growing. Lloyd Neurauter wasn't just a strict father. He was a tyrant, a manipulator, a man who ran his household like a cult, with himself as the leader who demanded absolute loyalty and worship. Every Saturday, Lloyd drove his daughters to the local ballet academy. He was the only father there, and he made sure everyone noticed. Each week, he'd arrive early and make an elaborate show of doing his daughter's hair right there in the academy, creating intricate buns specifically designed to attract the admiring gazes of the mothers around him. "Look at me," his actions screamed. "Look what a devoted father I am." But at home, those same daughters lived in constant fear. When Lloyd was angry, he'd order them to drop to their knees and face the wall in a line like prisoners. Sometimes he'd slap them across the face. He took pleasure in turning them against their mother, using every opportunity to reinforce that Michele was the problem. Michele was useless. Michele was the reason their family wasn't perfect. Karrie, especially, idolized her father. She hung on his every word, desperate for his approval, willing to do anything to stay in his good graces. Michele, meanwhile, endured constant verbal, emotional, and physical abuse. Around Thanksgiving 2007, Michele suddenly stopped speaking to her own parents. There had been no argument, no falling out. Michelle's mother later said she knew without asking that Lloyd must have threatened Michele or the children unless she cut off contact with her family. That's what abusers do. They isolate their victims. Then came 2008 and the financial crisis. Lloyd was laid off from his job. Unable to find work locally, he took a position in New Jersey. And Michele took her chance. She filed for divorce, sold the farmhouse, and tried to start a new life. Her eldest daughter went to live with Lloyd. Her 2 youngest daughters stayed with her in Corning. It should have been the start of a new chapter, freedom from abuse, a chance at happiness, but Lloyd wasn't finished with her, not by a long shot. From 2008 until Michele's death in 2017, Lloyd waged a relentless legal war against his ex-wife. He filed 26 separate legal claims against Michele, every single one of them false. He fought for full custody of the children, trying to paint Michele as an unfit mother, a danger to their daughters. But in August 2017, Lloyd's campaign finally failed. He didn't show up to a crucial court hearing, and sole custody of their youngest daughter was awarded to Michele. Michele was overjoyed. She celebrated by taking her daughter and friends out for the day, filming them laughing and sliding down grassy hills on blocks of ice. In the video, Michele looks genuinely happy for perhaps the first time in years, free from Lloyd's control, finally safe. Except she wasn't safe at all. She knew it too. In the weeks before her death, Michele did something that still haunts her friends today. She pulled them aside and made them promise something. If anything ever happened to her, would they look out for her daughters? Would they make sure the girls were okay? Her friends agreed, but they didn't think too much about it at the time. Now those words seemed horribly prophetic. Had Michele known she was in danger? Had she sensed that Lloyd wasn't going to let her win? Meanwhile, police were digging into Lloyd's background, and what they found was a man in financial ruin. He had over $100,000 in credit card debt. He was drowning, desperate for a lifeline. And Michele had a $250,000 life insurance policy. In the days immediately following Michelle's death, Lloyd did something that made police's suspicions skyrocket. He tried to collect on Michelle's life insurance. The woman wasn't even buried yet, and he was already trying to cash in on her death. He also went to the Steuben County Family Court to terminate his child support payments. Police met Lloyd as he was leaving the courthouse and asked him to come down to the station for a preliminary interview. Lloyd had originally told police he'd been in California for a job interview when Michele died, but investigators had since learned something interesting. Lloyd had flown to California on Sunday morning and returned the same day. That meant he'd been in New York the entire night of Michelle's murder, the night she died. Lloyd changed his story. He admitted he'd spent Saturday helping Karrie move into her new dorm in Rochester, which was only 90 minutes from Corning. He'd stayed in a hotel that night. Karrie had stopped by his hotel room before going to visit Michele. He'd walked her to her car, then returned to his room. The next morning, they'd had breakfast together before he left for the airport. Lloyd's cell phone records seemed to back up his story. His phone never left Rochester that night. But surveillance footage told a very different story. At approximately 10 o'clock that Saturday night, security cameras caught both Lloyd and Karrie leaving Rochester together in Karrie's car. Lloyd didn't reappear on camera until the following morning at 6:30, walking across the hotel parking lot wearing the exact same clothes as the night before. Where had they gone? What had they been doing for those 8.5 hours? Police knew exactly where they'd been, but they needed proof. They needed someone to break. Police made the decision to wiretap Lloyd's and Karrie's phones. Then they applied pressure by asking Karrie to come back to the station for additional questioning. The moment Karrie hung up with police, she immediately called her father. And what police heard on that call was absolutely damning.
Hi, sweetie.
Hey, so I just got off the phone with officer whatever from the Corning Police Department. He called. He's like, oh, I just like to meet with people face to face as well.
I'd like you to not do that if you can avoid it. Tell him I'm sorry. I got a counseling appointment back in New Jersey tonight. I got to get to my counseling appointment. Tell him this has been really hard on me.
Yeah.
Could you cry?
I'm like,
You cry and say, I'm sorry, I have to go. God, it would be nice if it was just over.
that would be the dream.
Well, that's really all I got to suggest right now.
Lloyd actually said, "Could you cry? You cry and say, I'm sorry, I have to go. That would be nice." He was literally directing his daughter on how to perform grief, how to manipulate the police, how to cover up their crime. Police now had no doubt. Lloyd had masterminded Michelle's murder, and Karrie had helped him carry it out. But they needed to move quickly before Lloyd and Karrie could coordinate their stories any further. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, I'm honestly curious. What's holding you back? Drop it in the comments. I actually want to know. Police brought both Lloyd and Karrie in for separate interviews before they could get their stories straight. Despite the mountain of evidence against him, despite the wiretapped conversations, despite everything, Lloyd sat in that interrogation room and denied any involvement in Michelle's death. He even confidently agreed to return for a polygraph test. He never came back. Karrie, on the other hand, cracked almost immediately. And what she revealed was so twisted, so calculated, so evil that it still defies comprehension. 1 week before the murder, Karrie said, her father had called her with a problem. He couldn't afford to pay Michelle child support anymore. He was out of options. He was going to kill himself. Unless he took a different option, the very last one available to him. He could kill Michelle instead and make it look like suicide. Then all his problems would disappear. Plus, he'd get that $250,000 life insurance payout. Lloyd laid out his plan in meticulous detail. He would put a towel in Michelle's mouth to muffle her screams. He'd strangle her with a rope. Then he'd throw her body over the banister to make it look like she'd hanged herself.
It was him and I. We were home. He was saying, like, that he was going to kill himself. But he brought up that there was this other option kind of thing, where he wanted to kill my mom. We dragged her around the corner and he tied the rope to the one prong of the banister and lifted her up and put her over the side. Sorry.
That's okay.
Karrie's role was simple. She would stay downstairs and keep her younger sister occupied. The 14-year-old often slept on the living room sofa, so Karrie just needed to make sure she didn't come upstairs while Lloyd was murdering her mother. And Karrie agreed. Think about that. She agreed to help her father murder her own mother. On that Saturday night, Karrie picked Lloyd up and drove him to Michelle's house. She disarmed the security system so he could get inside undetected. Then she went downstairs to watch her little sister while her father crept upstairs to kill their mother. Karrie heard Michelle scream, "Why are you here? What are you doing? Why? WHY?" Then everything went silent, horribly, completely silent. But things hadn't gone according to plan. The noise had woken up Karrie's 14-year-old sister. Karrie had to think fast. She rushed over, grabbed her little sister, and practically dragged her out of the house to the car. Meanwhile, upstairs, Lloyd finished strangling Michelle. When he was done, he climbed into the open hatch of Karrie's car without the 14-year-old seeing him. Just imagine that scene for a moment. A 14-year-old girl sitting in a car, confused about why her sister is rushing her away in the middle of the night, while her mother's murderer hides in the back. The woman who gave birth to her, who raised her, who loved her, lay dead just feet away. And her own sister had helped make it happen. This is only for my genuine viewers, the ones who really engage with these cases because they want to understand human nature at its darkest. So I have to ask you, what would you do differently if you were Michelle? If you saw the warning signs, if you knew your ex-husband was capable of anything, how would you protect yourself and your children? Tell us in the comments, because your insight might genuinely help someone else who's in a similar situation right now. Don't just scroll past this. Really think about it. This took me hours of painful research, reading autopsies, police files, and the cries of women that were ignored. If you felt safe watching from your screen, the least you can do is hit that red subscribe button. Police were ready to make arrests. They traced Lloyd's phone to a 5-story parking garage in Princeton, New Jersey. When they found him, he was sitting on the roof of the structure, threatening to jump. For 90 minutes, negotiators tried to talk him down. Lloyd played the victim, claiming he couldn't go on, that he'd rather die than face what he'd done. Finally, a state trooper who happened to be a former football player decided enough was enough. He tackled Lloyd to the ground, and the nightmare was over. Both Lloyd and Karrie were arrested for the murder of Michele Neurauter. Both initially pled not guilty, maintaining their innocence despite all the evidence against them. But after 2 weeks sitting in jail, Karrie's resolve broke. She agreed to testify against her father in exchange for a reduced charge of second-degree murder. And when she testified, she revealed one more horrifying detail that hadn't been in her original confession. After Lloyd killed Michelle, Karrie had actually gone upstairs. She'd seen her mother's body, and she'd helped her father drag Michelle's corpse over to the stairs before hoisting it up and over the banister to stage the hanging. Karrie didn't just enable the murder. She didn't just provide transportation and disable security. She actively participated in moving her mother's dead body. Imagine if it was your daughter, your sister, or your friend. Would you want their story buried under noise or told with care? Subscribing helps make sure nobody's story fades away. Not ready to subscribe? That's okay, but at least tell me why in the comments. I want to learn from you. Faced with Karrie's testimony and DNA evidence that placed him all over Michelle's clothing, Lloyd finally changed his plea to guilty. In court, he claimed he'd coerced Karrie into helping him by threatening to kill himself if she didn't cooperate. He painted himself as the sole mastermind and his daughter as a reluctant participant. On December 4, 2018, Lloyd Neurauter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He'll die behind bars, which is exactly what he deserves. But Lloyd's confession changed everything for Karrie. It opened up a new examination of her role in the crime and the psychological damage Lloyd had inflicted on her throughout her childhood. Remember those boxes Michelle had kept? Journals, court documents, screenshots of text messages between her and Lloyd. They all documented years of abuse, manipulation, and brainwashing. They showed how Lloyd had shaped Karrie from childhood to be his perfect, obedient follower. How he'd turned her against her own mother. How he'd made her believe Michelle was the enemy. The court began to see Karrie not just as a co-conspirator, but as a victim herself. A victim of extreme, lifelong psychological manipulation. Karrie's charge was reduced to second-degree manslaughter. She was sentenced to just 1 to 3 years in prison and was paroled on January 16, 2020. She'd served less than 2 years for helping murder her mother. During Karrie's trial, something remarkable happened. Michelle's own mother, Jenny Loader, spoke up for Karrie. In a letter to the judge, she wrote something that still brings tears to people's eyes. I do not believe my daughter, Michelle, would have wanted a long prison sentence for her daughter. She would want Karrie to eventually lead a happy life after everything she's been through and done. That might take a lot of therapy. Even from beyond the grave, Michelle was trying to protect her children, even the one who helped kill her. The case of Michele Neurauter raises questions that haunt us long after we learn the details. How does a parent poison a child's mind so thoroughly that they become capable of participating in murder? At what point does a victim of manipulation become responsible for their own actions? And how do we protect vulnerable people from the narcissists and abusers who see them as nothing more than pawns in their twisted games? Michelle tried to protect herself. She documented everything. She filed for divorce. She fought for custody. She asked her friends to watch over her daughters if anything happened. She did everything right. And it still wasn't enough. Before we close out this case, I want to make sure you've grabbed your copy of my book, True Crime Survival Guide, How to Stay Safe in a Dangerous World. After hearing what happened to Michelle, you understand why this book exists. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Whether you're dealing with a dangerous ex, worried about your safety, or just want to be prepared, this guide could save your life. It's specifically written for women, but the information inside is valuable for everyone. Now, if you found this case as compelling and disturbing as I did, I need you to do 3 things. First, smash that like button. Second, subscribe to Cold Crime Cases if you haven't already. And third, drop a comment below. Tell us what you think about this case. Tell us what you would have done differently. Tell us how we can better protect people like Michelle. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. You never know who might be in a situation right now where they need to understand the warning signs of an abuser like Lloyd. To Michelle's loved ones, to her friends who tried to help her, to her youngest daughter who had to witness the aftermath of this horror, we send our deepest condolences and our hope that justice, however imperfect, brings some measure of peace. This is Cold Crime Cases, reminding you to stay safe, trust your instincts, and never ignore the warning signs. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You truly never know what darkness might be hiding behind a familiar face.